Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, today we'll continue with architecture. Contemporary architecture. Contemporary architecture is the form of architecture post the 1960s to the modern period. We can simply define contemporary architecture as the building style of present day. Contemporary buildings tend to be highly functional. Usually, contemporary buildings consist of a frame structure, an open floor, and use of green components. It was basically the period of late 1900s. We saw a major political, cultural, and educational change in the world, and these changes undoubtedly affected architecture. New topics like global warming, biotechnology, international politics, racism, human rights were included in the architectural world. The Industrial Revolution as well as the French Revolution also brought a radical change in the manufacture of new buildings. Industries were set up, new materials were produced. In fact, there was mass production of new materials like iron, steel, zinc, glass were being incorporated in new design concepts. If we look at the characteristics of contemporary architecture, what basically contemporary architecture tried to do, it tried to push the boundaries of material, technology, as well as design. It tried to change the accepted tradition of buildings, also the use of new materials in an innovative way. Contemporary architecture is quite vast, and some of the topics that are included in contemporary architecture include computer aided design, blob architecture, modern architecture, sustainable architecture, postmodern architecture, high tech architecture, conceptual architecture. In fact, inshallah, we'll discuss some of them. Computer aided design or CAD is the use of computer technology in the design of a product. It is how we use computer programs to create a two-dimensional or three-dimensional graphical representations of the physical objects. With the help of CAD, we can create not only the precision drawings of the project but also the technical illustrations of various projects. It is easy to visualize the physical aspects of a project or a building with CAD. Not only can we visualize the physical aspects, but we can also visualize to some extent the environmental aspects, such as the path of the sun is taken into consideration in a CAD project. Also, the traditional drawbacks associated with pen and paper drawings are removed in CAD. Now, sustainable architecture. Sustainable architecture or green architecture is the design and development of a building in such a way that it is socially, economically, as well as ecologically sustainable. Sustainable architecture seeks to minimize the negative environmental impact of buildings by efficiency and moderations in the use of materials as well as energy. The idea of sustainable architecture is the idea of sustainability itself, that our actions as well as decisions do not inhibit the opportunities of the future generations. Energy efficiency over the entire life cycle of a building is the most important goal of sustainable architecture. Architects may use different active as well as passive techniques to reduce the energy needs of buildings and increase their ability to capture or generate their own energy. Also, the use of materials such as photoelectrical cells for generation of electricity, solar water heater, rainwater collection, wastewater management. Also, the buildings that are built in sustainable architecture, the main materials that are used are recyclable materials. Now, blob architecture or blob architecture. Blob architecture is usually used to describe buildings that are rounded or curved shaped. It can also be used to describe a building form that are organic or amoeba shaped. Historically speaking, the design of the buildings have been hindered by the performance of the materials. In fact, the materials that are locally available were used to build buildings. But now, with the modern techniques, and now the materials can be forged into any shape and any size with sufficient strength led to the formation of this new type of architecture. In fact, it was in the 1990s with the widespread adaptation of computer-aided design, the unconventional geometric shapes and buildings that were free of right angles became practical. In fact, the term Blob Architecture was coined by Gray Lynn in 1995. Now, this is the London City Hall in London, which was architectured by Sir Norman Foster, and this is the Allianz Arena in Munich, Germany. These are the examples of blob architecture. Now, modern architecture. Modern architecture is basically the style of architecture which emerged in the first half of 20th century and became more so dominant after the World War II. This type of architecture was based on the new technologies of construction as well as the use of glass, steel, as well as reinforced concrete. There was a sense of simplicity and clarity in modern architecture. There was elimination of any unnecessary detail, and there was use of industrially produced materials. Modern architecture started in Europe and United States around 1900s, and at the end of the 19th century, skyscrapers began to appear in United States because of the shortage of land as well as the high cost of real estate. This is the Trump International Tower in Chicago, which is an example of modern architecture. Now, the basic principles of architecture. The basic principles of architecture involve truth and beauty. Now, truth. Truth is one of the most important principle of architecture. Truth means clarity of purpose as well as clarity of structure. Now, clarity of purpose. Every structure must convey the purpose for which it is constructed. It should not deceive the eyes of a person even for a moment. It should not convey any false statement or suggestion with regard to the purpose of its construction. The statement given to a structure should easily distinguish and indicate whether it is for domestic, public, or any other particular purpose. For example, a church must not look like a town hall, and a temple should express itself as a religious building, not as any other ordinary structure. Now, clarity of structure. Truth is the clarity of structure in architecture. In any structure, every part of the structure should convey the function that it is performing in its position. For example, a column in a structure with materials with which it is constructed must express its strength. A building materials must have their true place and use. The use of the materials in a building must exhibit its strength as well as fitness. For example, granite stone is due to its strength is considered as a good foundation material. Hence, it is used for foundation and basement. Whereas bricks that are also considered strong are used for superstructure. Now, beauty. Beauty is Beauty is a quality or combination of qualities which gives a good feel to the sense of sight. The feeling of beauty is universal. Beauty comes from adjustments of plans and sections and elevations of various materials and treatment of the surfaces. Beauty is in the form of objects and it does not qualify to be imparted by the mind of the observer. There is no specific precise rule for the definition or to judge a beauty of a structure. Now, architectural spatial organizations. Organization space describes the influence of spatial environment on the health, the mind, and the behavior of humans in and around organizations. The organization spaces must be easily accessible. They must be segregated for privacy. There must be a required amount of exposure for light, ventilation. It must be flexible in use and can be freely manipulated. The various types of architectural spatial organizations include centralized, linear, radial, clustered, and grid organization. A centralized organization consists of a number of secondary spaces grouped around a dominant central space that is generally regular in form and large enough to gather a number of secondary spaces about its perimeter. Now, linear organization. A linear organization consists essentially of a series of spaces. These spaces can either be directly related to one another or be linked through a separate and distinct linear space. A linear organization usually consists of a repetitive spaces that are alike in size, form, and function. A radial space consists of a central space from which a number of linear organizations extend in a radial manner. The central space is usually the hub, and from that the rest of the linear organizations extend. A clustered space consists of repetition or cellular spaces that have similar functions and share a common visual trait such as shape or orientation. Now, grid organization. A grid organization consists of forms and spaces whose positions in space and relationship with one another are regulated by three-dimensional grid pattern or field. Grids can be created with rows or columns.